The day after Savannah Mercer turned 18, her stepfather handed her a garbage bag and told her to pack. Her mother stood at the kitchen sink, staring at a clean pan, and said nothing. Savannah walked out with $34, a duffel bag, and an old photograph of her father, Ethan Mercer, holding her as a baby. She had nowhere to go. For 3 days, she slept in the back seat of her aging Honda Civic, parked in gas stations, supermarket lots, and rest stops. She survived on cheap fries and bottled water, while searching for jobs that never seemed to call back. Then a lawyer called. He told her something impossible. The grandfather her mother had claimed died before she was born had been alive the entire time. Not only that, but he had spent the last 15 years living in a small town called Pine Hollow, building a cabin with his own hands. And when he died, he left everything to her. The cabin, the land, his savings, his legacy. But that wasn't the shocking part. The shocking part was what he had hidden inside the walls. For 15 years, Harold Mercer had been leaving something behind for the granddaughter he was never allowed to see, something Savannah's mother never wanted her to find. And now the cabin belonged to her. At exactly 7 o'clock on the morning after her 18th birthday, Derek Holloway dropped a black garbage bag onto Savannah's bed. The heavy plastic crinkled loudly in the small bedroom. "Clothes and personal stuff only," he said from the doorway. "Leave everything else." Savannah sat upright. She wasn't surprised. For years, Derek had treated her like an unwanted guest in his house. Ever since marrying her mother, Vanessa, he had referred to her as "your daughter" instead of using her name. Still, hearing the words hurt. "You have until noon," he said. Then he walked away. Savannah packed quietly. 2 pairs of jeans, 3 shirts, a jacket, her work uniform from the diner where she worked weekends, a toothbrush, a charger that only worked if held at a certain angle, and the photograph. The photograph was the one thing she valued most. It showed Ethan Mercer holding her when she was only a few days old. His smile looked tired but proud. She barely remembered him. He had died when she was 3. At least, that was what she'd always been told. Downstairs, Vanessa stood at the sink. Water ran over a frying pan that was already clean. "Mom?" No answer. "Mom, look at me." Vanessa finally turned around. Her eyes were red, but her expression remained distant. "You'll be okay," she said softly. Savannah laughed once, a bitter sound. "I have $34. You have a job, a part-time job." Vanessa looked away. "Derek thinks it's time." The words landed harder than the eviction itself. Because they weren't Derek's anymore. They were hers. Savannah picked up her bag and walked out. No hugs. No goodbye, no promises. The Honda started on the 3rd try. The check engine light glowed immediately. She drove until the house disappeared behind her. That first night, she parked in a supermarket lot. Sleep never really came. Every sound felt dangerous. Truck engines, footsteps, slamming doors. The second day, she spent searching job listings on her phone. Most required experience. Many required permanent addresses. All required things she didn't have. By the 3rd day, she had $17 left. She sat on the hood of her car at a roadside rest area, eating cold fries from the night before. Her phone rang. Unknown number. She almost ignored it. Almost. "Hello? May I speak with Savannah Mercer?" "This is Savannah. My name is Benjamin Hart. I'm an attorney with Hart and Whitmore Legal Group." Something in his tone made her sit up straighter. "I'm calling regarding the estate of Harold Mercer." Savannah frowned. "My grandfather died before I was born." Silence filled the line. Then the lawyer spoke carefully. "No, Miss Mercer. He passed away 6 months ago." Savannah stopped breathing. "What?" "He named you sole beneficiary of his estate." The world suddenly felt very still. The wind stopped. The traffic noise faded. Everything narrowed to the lawyer's voice. "Miss Mercer," Benjamin continued gently, "your grandfather spent 15 years trying to find you, and before he died, he left you a cabin in Pine Hollow." Savannah stared at the photograph resting beside her on the hood of the car. For the first time in years, she felt something stronger than fear. Questions, thousands of them, and before the week was over, she would begin discovering answers hidden inside the walls of a cabin built by a man who had never stopped loving her. 5 hours later, Savannah crossed a narrow wooden bridge and entered Pine Hollow. The town was exactly what she imagined a forgotten place would look like. One main street, a hardware store, a diner, a church, a general store, and a post office no larger than a garage. The late afternoon sun hung low in the sky as she parked in front of Hart and Whitmore Legal Group. Benjamin Hart was waiting. He looked to be in his late 50s, dressed in a gray suit that had probably seen better days. "You must be Savannah," she nodded. He shook her hand gently. "I'm sorry we couldn't find you sooner." Inside his office, he handed her a key and several documents. The property transfer was straightforward. The cabin was hers. No mortgage, no debts, no unpaid taxes. Harold had made sure of that. Before she left, Savannah asked the question that had been haunting her since the phone call. "Why didn't he ever find me?" Benjamin sighed. "He tried." "What do you mean?" "He came to my office every year." The lawyer opened a file drawer and pulled out a thick folder. "Every year he asked if there was any new way to contact you." Savannah stared at the folder. 15 years of effort. 15 years she had never known existed. By the time she reached the cabin, the sun was disappearing behind the trees. The dirt road twisted through thick woods before opening into a small clearing. The cabin stood alone. Simple, beautiful, hand-built. A covered porch stretched across the front. Carved leaves decorated the doorframe. Every board seemed carefully placed. Every corner perfectly square. Savannah stepped out of the car and simply stared. Someone had spent years building this place for her. Inside, the cabin smelled like cedar and old wood. The rooms were modest. A small kitchen, a living room with a stone fireplace, one bedroom, one bathroom. Nothing fancy, but everything felt solid, intentional, as if every nail had been driven with purpose. That evening, she swept the floors and wiped dust from the counters. She found a broom in the closet, a flashlight in a drawer, and a single wooden chair beside the fireplace. When darkness fell, she sat in that chair eating crackers from a convenience store package. The silence felt strange, not empty, peaceful. That was when she noticed it. The baseboard behind the chair. At first glance, it looked normal, but the longer she stared, the more something bothered her. Every other baseboard in the cabin sat flush against the wall. This one didn't. There was a narrow, perfectly even gap. Not damage, not age. Design. Savannah set down her crackers. Slowly, she knelt beside it. She pressed one end. Nothing happened. She pressed harder near the center. Still nothing. Then she tried the opposite side. The wood slid sideways. Smoothly. Silently. Her heart jumped. A hidden compartment. Inside were 3 white envelopes, each carefully labeled in neat handwriting. Savannah, age 6. Savannah, age 7. Savannah, age 8. For a moment, she simply stared. Her hands trembled. Then she opened the first envelope. Inside was a birthday card. A small drawing of a cake decorated the front. She unfolded it. "Happy birthday, Savannah. I hope this card reaches you someday. I sent one to your mother's house, but it came back, just like the others. So I'm keeping this one safe. You are 6 years old today. I haven't stopped thinking about you for a single day. Your father would be proud of the young lady you're becoming. I love you. Grandpa Harold." A tear landed on the paper. Then another. And another. Savannah pressed the card against her chest. For years, she had believed she was unwanted, forgotten, alone. Yet here, hidden inside a wall built by a man she barely knew, was proof that someone had been loving her all along. And deep inside, she suddenly knew this was only the first secret Harold Mercer had left behind. Savannah barely slept that night. The birthday cards remained spread across the living room floor beside the fireplace. Every few hours she woke, switched on the flashlight, and reread them. The handwriting never changed. Steady, patient, loving. By sunrise, she had cried so much her eyes hurt. Yet for the first time in years, she didn't feel abandoned. Someone had wanted her. Someone had fought to stay connected. The next morning, she drove into Pine Hollow and stopped at Callahan Mercantile. The bell above the door jingled as she entered. Behind the counter stood Ruth Callahan. The silver-haired woman looked up and smiled gently. "You found them, didn't you?" Savannah froze. "The letters." Ruth nodded. "Harold told me he'd hidden things in the cabin." "You knew?" "Not where, not exactly. Just that he was leaving something behind for you." Savannah sat on a stool near the counter. For the next hour, she told Ruth everything. The hidden compartment, the birthday cards, the words Harold had written. When she finished, Ruth wiped her hands on her apron and looked toward the window. "Your father would have loved those letters." Savannah leaned forward. "Tell me about him." For a long moment, Ruth was silent. Then she nodded. "All right. She folded her hands. Your father, Ethan, was a carpenter. Same as Harold. A small smile touched her face. Best one in 3 counties. Savannah listened carefully. No one had ever spoken much about Ethan. Certainly not her mother. He built houses? Savannah asked. Mostly. He loved working with wood. Harold taught him everything. Ruth's smile faded. But Ethan died because he took a construction job. The words landed heavily. Savannah had heard the story before. A work accident, nothing more. What happened? Ruth looked down. There was a scaffold collapse. Savannah felt her stomach tighten. He was 4 stories up. The store seemed quieter. He took the job because it paid better than residential work. Why? Ruth's eyes filled with sadness. Because Harold needed heart surgery. Savannah stared. What? Your grandfather had a serious heart condition. Insurance wouldn't cover all of it. Ruth paused. There was a $12,000 gap. Savannah couldn't speak. Ethan took the construction job to earn the money. The silence stretched. He did it for Harold? Ruth nodded. Harold begged him not to. The older woman's voice softened. But Ethan told him, "You raised me by yourself. Let me take care of you for once." Savannah looked away. Outside, sunlight glinted off parked cars. Everything suddenly felt different. Her father wasn't just a photograph anymore. He was becoming real. A man. A son. A person who made sacrifices. What happened after he died? Savannah asked quietly. Ruth sighed. Harold broke. She didn't soften the words. He drank. Badly. For nearly 2 years. Savannah lowered her eyes. The birthday cards suddenly felt fragile. Then, one morning, he showed up here. Ruth pointed toward the floor. 6 in the morning. Sober. Clean-shaven. What changed? Ruth smiled sadly. He looked at me and said, "I made a promise to my son." Savannah felt her chest tighten. What promise? Ruth's eyes met hers. To take care of you. The words seemed to echo through the store. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then Ruth reached beneath the counter and pulled out an old photograph. Harold, Ethan, a half-built house behind them, both smiling, both covered in sawdust, both alive. Savannah held the picture carefully. For the first time, she saw the resemblance. The same hands, the same eyes, the same quiet strength. And suddenly, she understood something. The cabin wasn't simply an inheritance. It was a promise a grieving father had made to a dying son. And somehow, 15 years later, that promise was still being kept. Savannah drove back to the cabin with the photograph resting carefully on the passenger seat. She glanced at it several times during the short drive. Harold and Ethan stood shoulder to shoulder in front of a house they had built together, both smiling, both unaware of how little time they had left. When she arrived at the cabin, the afternoon sunlight spilled through the windows. For a while, she simply walked from room to room, touching the walls, running her fingers along shelves and door frames, looking at everything differently. The cabin was no longer just a building. It was evidence. Proof of love. Proof of promises. Proof of years she had never known existed. By evening, she found herself standing in the bedroom, the smallest room in the cabin. One bare bed frame, one window. One closet. Nothing unusual, at least at first glance. But Harold had already hidden 2 compartments. Why stop there? Savannah began searching. She checked the closet walls, tapped on floorboards, pressed against trim pieces. For nearly an hour, she found nothing. Then her hand brushed a small wooden button hidden near the baseboard beneath the window. She froze. Carefully, she pressed it. A soft click echoed inside the wall. A narrow panel swung inward. Her heart immediately started racing. Another compartment. This one was much deeper. Inside sat 2 bundles of envelopes tied together with faded kitchen string. Savannah carried them to the living room floor and sat cross-legged beside the fireplace. She untied the first bundle. Every envelope was addressed to the same person, Vanessa Mercer, her mother. Savannah's pulse quickened. Each envelope carried red markings. Returned to sender. Every single one. She opened the first letter. Dear Vanessa, I have been sober for 8 months. I am asking you for one chance, one afternoon, one visit, one opportunity to know my granddaughter. Please, for Ethan's sake. Harold. Savannah swallowed hard. She opened another, then another, then another. The pattern never changed. Year after year, request after request, hope after hope. Every letter returned. Every letter rejected. The 6th letter hit hardest. Dear Vanessa, I know you are reading these before you send them back. I do not understand why you hate me this much. Savannah is all I have left of Ethan. Please let me know her. Please, Harold. Tears blurred her vision. For years, she had believed Harold never cared. That belief was crumbling with every page. The second bundle contained legal documents, court filings, petitions, character references. Harold had gone to court. He had fought for visitation rights. He had hired lawyers, gathered witnesses, submitted proof of sobriety, done everything the legal system required, and still lost. Near the bottom sat one final envelope, older than the rest. The paper was yellowed with age. The handwriting wasn't Harold's. Savannah knew whose it was before opening it. Ethan. Her hands trembled as she unfolded the letter. Dad, I know you don't want me taking this job. I know the site isn't safe, but your surgery is 6 weeks away, and I'm not letting you skip it again. You spent your whole life taking care of me. Let me take care of you. And if anything happens, which it won't, take care of Savannah. Promise me. She's the best thing I've ever done. Love. Ethan. Savannah stopped reading. Her breath caught. The room blurred. For several long moments, she couldn't move, couldn't think, couldn't speak. Everything Harold had done suddenly made sense. The cabin, the letters, the hidden compartments, the endless determination. It wasn't guilt alone driving him. It was a promise made to a son who never came home. Savannah pressed the letter against her chest. Outside, evening shadows stretched across the porch. Inside, surrounded by the truth her mother had buried for 15 years, she finally understood something heartbreaking. Harold Mercer had never abandoned her. He had spent half his life trying to find his way back to her, and someone had made sure he never could. Savannah remained on the living room floor long after darkness filled the cabin. Ethan's letter rested in her lap. The fireplace stood silent. The hidden compartment in the bedroom remained open behind her. Everything she thought she knew about her family had changed in less than a week. Her grandfather had fought for her. Her father had sacrificed himself for his family, and her mother had hidden the truth. Eventually, Savannah folded Ethan's letter and placed it carefully beside the others. Then she looked around the cabin. Something still bothered her. Harold had spent 15 years building this place. 3 hidden compartments seemed too few. A man who thought this carefully would not stop halfway. The thought stayed with her until nearly midnight. Finally, she stood and walked to the stone fireplace. The structure dominated the living room. Large river stones fitted together so perfectly they almost looked carved from a single piece. Savannah knelt. She ran her fingers across the stones. Most felt solid, unmoving. Then she noticed one near the bottom. It sat slightly higher than the others, barely noticeable, unless someone was looking for it. Her heart quickened. She pressed it. Nothing. She pushed sideways. The stone shifted. A hidden latch clicked. Slowly, she removed the stone and revealed a brass handle concealed beneath it. Her breath caught. This has to be it. She pulled. A section of floorboard lifted upward on hidden hinges. Below sat a compartment larger than all the others. Inside rested a wooden box and a thick manila envelope. Savannah carefully lifted both onto the floor. The envelope came first. Inside were court records. Hundreds of pages. Petitions. Affidavits, character references, letters from Harold's doctor, statements from neighbors, proof of sobriety, proof of employment, proof that Harold had done everything possible to rebuild his life. Near the top sat the court's final decision. Petition denied. Savannah stared at the words. One sentence, one ruling, 12 years of separation. She turned another page. There she found something that made her stomach twist. A sworn statement signed by Derek Holloway. The document claimed Harold had threatened him, claimed he was unstable, claimed he remained dangerous. Savannah read it twice, then a third time. The words felt completely disconnected from the grandfather she had come to know through the letters. The grandfather who built music boxes and birthday cards. The grandfather who never stopped trying. She set the papers aside and opened the wooden box. Savings bonds, dozens of them, each one issued in her name, each one purchased in a different year. Savannah counted slowly. 15 bonds, one for every year Harold had been waiting. At the bottom lay a handwritten note. Approximate value, $47,000. Savannah covered her mouth. $47,000. Harold had lived alone in this cabin, worked with his hands, saved every year, not for himself, for her. Beneath the bonds lay one final envelope. No address, no date, only her name, Savannah. The handwriting was shakier than before, older, She unfolded the letter carefully. My dear Savannah, if you are reading this, then you found everything. The walls, the letters, the cards, the bonds. I hope you found them in order. That is how I built them, one compartment at a time, 1 year at a time. I need you to know why I hid these things. The answer is simple. Your mother could destroy letters. She could return cards. She could keep us apart. But she could not take what she could not find. The cabin was the only place she never touched. Savannah's eyes blurred. She continued reading. Your father died trying to save my life. I carried that guilt every day, but I made him a promise. I promised I would take care of you. Everything in this cabin was built to keep that promise. The bonds are yours. The land is yours. The cabin is yours. Most importantly, know this. I loved you every day of your life, even when I couldn't see you, even when the courts said no, even when I thought I might never meet you again. I loved you always. Grandpa Harold. Savannah lowered the letter. The room had gone completely silent. For the first time since arriving in Pine Hollow, she understood the truth. The cabin was never an inheritance. It was 15 years of love hidden inside wood and stone, and now it belonged to her. The next morning, Savannah drove into town carrying the wooden box of savings bonds and Harold's final letter. Benjamin Hart examined the bonds one by one. His reading glasses slid lower on his nose as he checked serial numbers and dates. Finally, he looked up. They're real. Savannah sat quietly. How much? Benjamin leaned back. Harold estimated $47,000 a few years ago. With accumulated interest, it may be worth even more now. Savannah stared at the box. $47,000. A fortune compared to the $17 she had left when the lawyer first called. Benjamin smiled softly. Your grandfather planned carefully. He did. He came into this office every January. Savannah looked up. Every January? Benjamin nodded. He'd hand me property tax receipts and ask the same question. What question? Have you found my granddaughter yet? Savannah swallowed hard. Benjamin gently closed the box. He never stopped believing you'd come. The drive back to the cabin felt different. The forest seemed less lonely. The winding road less uncertain. For the first time in years, Savannah felt like she belonged somewhere. When she arrived, she spent the afternoon replacing a loose porch board. The work helped quiet her thoughts. Harold's old tools fit naturally in her hands. A tape measure, a hammer, a level. Simple things. Things her father had once used. The sun was beginning to lower when she heard tires on gravel. A silver sedan appeared around the bend. Savannah immediately recognized it. Her stomach tightened. The car stopped. The driver's door opened. Vanessa stepped out. For several seconds, neither woman moved. Then Savannah noticed something unusual. Vanessa was alone. Not quite. The passenger door opened. Derek climbed out, his expression already irritated, as though the trip itself had inconvenienced him. Vanessa slowly approached the porch. We need to talk. Savannah remained standing. About what? Vanessa glanced at the cabin. Your grandfather's property. The words instantly annoyed Savannah. Not, how are you? Not, are you okay? Property. The same daughter who had been thrown out 6 days earlier suddenly mattered because she owned something. Savannah folded her arms. You can come up. Vanessa climbed the steps. Derek followed. Savannah blocked his path. You weren't invited. His face darkened. I'm her husband, and you're the man who handed me a garbage bag. Silence. For a moment, Derek looked ready to argue. Then Vanessa spoke. Please. Reluctantly, he stayed near the bottom of the steps. Vanessa sat in the old wooden chair. She looked exhausted. Dark circles rested beneath her eyes. I didn't know this place existed. Savannah said nothing. The lawyer called. Interesting. Vanessa looked down. I was worried. That almost made Savannah laugh. You were worried? You're my daughter. You remembered that now? The words struck harder than Savannah intended. Vanessa flinched. For several moments, neither spoke. Finally, Savannah went inside. When she returned, she carried a bundle of letters tied with string. She placed them on the porch railing, one by one. Vanessa's face slowly lost color. She recognized them immediately. Where did you get those? The walls. Vanessa closed her eyes. Savannah continued. He wrote to you every year. No answer. He asked to see me. Silence. He begged. Vanessa looked away. You told me he was dead. Still no response. You lied. Derek suddenly spoke from below. Your grandfather was a drunk. Savannah turned. He was sober for 13 years. You don't know that. I have the letters. Derek crossed his arms. People lie. Savannah walked inside again. When she returned, she carried the wooden box. She opened it. Savings bonds spilled across the porch table. Derek's eyes widened. What is all this? My inheritance. His expression changed instantly. Greed. Pure and unmistakable. Savannah saw it immediately. How much? Vanessa looked horrified, but Derek had already asked. Savannah met his eyes. More than $47,000. The porch fell silent. For the first time since arriving, Savannah felt something shift. The truth was no longer hidden inside walls. It was standing in the open, and neither her mother nor Derek could pretend it didn't exist anymore. The silence on the porch stretched for several long seconds. Derek stared at the savings bonds spread across the table. Vanessa stared at the letters. Savannah stood between them. For the first time in her life, she felt as though the balance of power had shifted. No one could rewrite the truth anymore. It was sitting right there in front of them. Derek cleared his throat. $47,000 is a lot of money. Savannah immediately regretted inviting him onto the property. His focus wasn't on Harold or Ethan or the years that had been stolen. Only the money. Vanessa slowly turned toward him. Something in her expression changed. Go wait in the car. Derek frowned. What? You heard me. He laughed once. You drove 5 hours to have an emotional reunion, and now you're kicking me out? Vanessa's voice hardened. Go. For a moment it looked like he might argue. Then he glanced at Savannah, at the bonds, and finally at the letters. Without another word, he turned and walked down the porch steps. A minute later, the car door slammed. The engine remained off. He was waiting, listening. Vanessa sat quietly for a long time. Finally, she picked up one of Harold's letters. Her fingers trembled. I remember this one. Savannah said nothing. I remember throwing it away. The admission hung heavily between them. Why? Vanessa stared at the envelope. Her voice was barely above a whisper. Because every time I saw his handwriting, I saw your father. Savannah looked away. I was 24 when Ethan died. The words came slowly, as if they had been trapped for years. I had no idea how to survive it. Vanessa's eyes filled with tears. People kept telling me I needed to be strong. She laughed bitterly. I wasn't strong. The tears finally escaped. I was terrified. Savannah listened, not forgiving, not yet, but listening. When Harold showed up drunk that night, I panicked. Vanessa wiped her face. I knew he'd gotten sober later. Then why keep me away? Because I couldn't separate him from my grief. The answer hurt because it sounded honest. When I looked at him, I saw Ethan's funeral. She paused. When I looked at you, I saw Ethan too. Savannah's chest tightened. Vanessa continued. You have his eyes. Another pause. His hands. Her voice cracked. The way you go quiet when you're upset. For years, Savannah had imagined her mother as cruel. The reality sitting before her looked different. Not cruel. Broken. Broken people could still cause terrible damage, but they were not always monsters. Vanessa picked up another letter. I stole 15 years. The words were simple. No excuses, no defense, just truth. Yes. Savannah's voice remained calm. You did? Vanessa nodded. I know. The sun slowly dropped behind the trees. Golden light filtered through the branches surrounding the cabin. For a long while, neither woman spoke. Eventually, Savannah stood. Come inside. Vanessa looked surprised. What? Come see what he built. They walked through the cabin together. Vanessa touched the carved trim around the doorway, the handmade shelves, the smooth wooden counters. Everywhere she looked, Harold's craftsmanship remained visible. Near the fireplace, Savannah showed her the birthday cards. The first one, then the second, then the third. Vanessa read each silently. By the time she finished, tears covered her cheeks. He kept them. He kept all of them. Vanessa sat in the wooden chair beside the fireplace, the same chair where Harold had probably spent countless evenings. He never stopped loving you. Savannah nodded. I know. And he never stopped loving Ethan. Another silence followed. Then Vanessa whispered something Savannah never expected to hear. He was a broken man who did his best. She looked around the room. I was a broken woman who did her worst. The honesty hit harder than any excuse could have. Later that evening, Vanessa left. No arguments, no demands, no discussion of money, just a quiet goodbye. After the car disappeared down the road, Savannah sat alone on the porch. The pain wasn't gone. The betrayal still existed. But something had changed. For the first time, forgiveness no longer felt impossible. Not because Vanessa deserved it, but because Savannah deserved peace. And as darkness settled over the cabin, she realized Harold had spent 15 years teaching her exactly what that looked like. Spring arrived slowly in Pine Hollow. The last traces of winter disappeared from the woods surrounding the cabin, and fresh green leaves began appearing on the trees Harold had spent years looking at from his porch. 3 months passed. For Savannah, they were the busiest months of her life. Every morning she woke to sunlight filtering through the cabin windows, and immediately found something that needed doing. The porch came first. Several boards had softened with age. She replaced them one by one using Harold's tools. She measured carefully, cut slowly, checked every joint twice. By the end of April, the porch looked almost new. Ruth Callahan inspected it one afternoon and nodded approvingly. "Your grandfather would have liked that." Savannah smiled. It was one of the few compliments that still made her emotional. The garden came next. The backyard had become overgrown during the months after Harold's death. Savannah spent entire weekends pulling weeds, turning soil, hauling rocks, planting rows of tomatoes, peppers, beans, and lettuce. Ruth provided most of the seeds. "You'll thank me in July," she promised. As it turned out, she was right. Inside the cabin, changes happened slowly but steadily. Savannah purchased a used bed from a family in town, then a small kitchen table, then 2 mismatched chairs. None of it was expensive, but every piece belonged to her. The cabin stopped feeling like a memorial. It started feeling like home. The savings bonds changed everything. Following Benjamin Hart's advice, Savannah used only a small portion of the money. Most remained safely invested. The rest covered tuition at North Valley Technical College. The first day of classes terrified her. She almost turned around in the parking lot. But then she thought about Harold, about Ethan, about promises, and she walked inside. Her schedule quickly filled. Carpentry, woodworking design, construction fundamentals. Every class felt strangely familiar, as if part of her already understood the language of wood. One afternoon, her instructor, a retired contractor named Mr. Dawson, watched her fitting a joint together. After several minutes, he nodded. "You've got natural hands." Savannah looked up. "What does that mean?" "It means you listen to the wood." He tapped the workbench. "Most people try forcing it." Savannah smiled. The compliment stayed with her all week. Weekends belonged to Callahan Mercantile. Ruth hired her officially. The pay wasn't impressive, but Savannah loved the work. She stocked shelves, helped customers, learned everyone's names. Pine Hollow was the kind of town where people remembered birthdays and asked about your garden. For someone who had spent most of her life feeling invisible, it felt almost unreal. In February, another opportunity appeared. Chief Monica Reeves from the Pine Hollow Volunteer Fire Company stopped by the store. "You ever think about volunteering?" Savannah hadn't. By the end of the conversation, she signed up. Training was difficult. Long evenings, heavy equipment, endless drills. But she enjoyed it. The discipline, the teamwork, the sense of purpose. For the first time, she belonged to something bigger than herself. One evening after training, Savannah sat alone on the cabin porch. The sky glowed orange beyond the trees. Birds settled into the branches overhead. The garden behind her was beginning to grow. The repaired porch stood solid beneath her feet. The cabin windows reflected the fading sunlight. Everything around her felt alive. Months earlier, she had arrived with $34, a duffel bag, and nowhere to sleep. Now, she had a home, friends, a future. As the evening breeze moved through the trees, Savannah looked toward the woods and smiled. For years, Harold had built this place, hoping she would someday find it. He hadn't simply left her a cabin. He had given her a second chance at life. And for the first time, she was finally beginning to build one of her own. Summer arrived in Pine Hollow, with long days and warm evenings. The garden behind the cabin flourished. Tomato vines climbed their stakes. Bean plants stretched toward the sun. The lettuce grew faster than Savannah could eat it. Every morning before class, she walked through the rows, checking leaves and pulling weeds. It became one of her favorite parts of the day. The quiet reminded her of Harold. She often imagined him standing in the same spot years earlier, planning a future he hoped she would someday have. One Saturday afternoon, Savannah was stocking shelves at Callahan Mercantile when the bell above the door chimed. A teenage girl stepped inside. She couldn't have been older than 16. Her jacket was too thin for the weather. A worn backpack hung from one shoulder. The girl moved cautiously, scanning the room before taking a few tentative steps toward the refrigerated sandwich case. Something about her looked familiar. Not her face, her expression, the way she carried herself, the way she seemed ready to leave at the first sign she wasn't welcome. Savannah recognized it instantly. She had worn the same expression herself. The girl studied the prices for a long moment. Then she checked the small amount of cash in her hand. After a few seconds, she quietly turned away. "Hey," Savannah called. The girl froze. "You hungry?" The teenager looked embarrassed. "A little." Savannah opened the cooler. She grabbed a turkey sandwich and a bottle of water. Then she placed both on the counter. "You can have these." The girl immediately shook her head. "I don't have enough money." "I didn't ask if you had enough." For a moment, neither moved. Then the girl slowly accepted the food. Savannah pointed toward a stool near the front window. "Sit down." The teenager hesitated. "It's okay." The girl sat. She ate slowly, carefully, as if she wanted the meal to last. Savannah didn't ask questions. She didn't ask where she lived. She didn't ask why she looked exhausted. She simply let her eat. Sometimes kindness worked best without an interrogation attached to it. When the girl finished, she walked back to the counter. "Thank you." "You're welcome." Savannah tore a piece of paper from a notepad and wrote down a phone number. "If you ever need help, call." The girl folded the paper and slipped it into her pocket. Then she left. Ruth had watched the entire exchange from the stockroom doorway. After the girl disappeared down the street, she walked over. Harold would have done the same thing. Savannah smiled. "I know." That evening, after work, she sat on the porch watching the sunset. The rocking chair she had bought from a second-hand store creaked softly beneath her. The cabin glowed warmly behind her. Her phone rang. Vanessa. For several months now, they had spoken once a week. The conversations were still awkward, still careful, but they were real. Savannah answered. "Hi, Mom." "Hi, sweetheart." The words still sounded strange, yet not unpleasant. They talked about ordinary things. The garden, classes, the weather. Then Vanessa hesitated. "I mailed something to you." "What is it?" "A box?" Silence. Then Vanessa continued. "Pictures." Savannah sat up straighter. "What kind of pictures?" "Pictures of Ethan." Her breath caught. "I found them in the closet." Another pause. "I should have given them to you years ago." Savannah looked toward the trees. The evening sun filtered through the leaves. For the first time, she heard genuine regret in her mother's voice. "Thank you." When the box arrived 3 days later, Savannah carried it onto the porch. Inside were dozens of photographs, baby pictures, family gatherings, birthdays, moments frozen in time. And there, in photo after photo, was Ethan, holding her, laughing with Harold, building things, living. For hours, Savannah sat turning pages of a life she had never known. As the sun began to set, she realized something important. Harold had left her a home, but the people around her were helping her rebuild something even more valuable. A family, not perfect, not complete, but real. And perhaps that was the greatest gift of all. By early autumn, Pine Hollow no longer felt like a place Savannah was passing through. It felt like a place that had begun to recognize her. The cabin had changed again. Not dramatically, but steadily. Like a life being lived inside it. White cotton curtains now hung in the windows, sewn by Savannah's own hands. The stitching was imperfect, slightly uneven in places, but when the wind moved through them, they softened the entire room. The porch had been fully rebuilt, every board replaced, sanded, and stained. She had measured each piece 3 times using Harold's old level, as if checking the world itself for stability. In the backyard, the garden was now a living system. Tomatoes hung heavy on their vines. Beans climbed their stakes. Peppers deepened in color under the late sun. What had once been empty ground was now something alive. Something sustained. Savannah often thought about how strange it was that she had once believed she had nothing. Now she spent her mornings maintaining something that required her presence. Her afternoons belonged to North Valley Technical College. Carpentry had become more than a class. It had become language. Wood spoke to her in ways she didn't fully understand yet, but she was learning to listen. Her instructor noticed it early. "You don't force it," he told her one day, watching her fit a joint. You adjust to it. Savannah nodded. That was something Harold would have understood. She worked weekends at Callahan Mercantile. Ruth treated her less like an employee and more like someone who had always belonged there. The town, once unfamiliar, now greeted her by name. Even small things felt different. People asked how her garden was doing. They remembered what she studied. They left space for her in conversations. She was becoming part of a rhythm that had existed long before she arrived. She also volunteered with the Pine Hollow Fire Company. The work was physical, demanding, sometimes exhausting, but it gave her something she hadn't known she needed: purpose shared with others, structure without isolation. One evening, after training, Savannah sat alone on the cabin porch. The sky was turning orange beyond the trees. The air carried the scent of cut grass and cooling soil. The rocking chair creaked beneath her slow movement. Inside the cabin, photographs now lined the shelf she had built herself. Ethan, smiling in faded prints. Harold, standing beside unfinished frames of houses, pieces of a history she was slowly learning to hold. She thought about how she had arrived here. 18 years old, a garbage bag, $34, no home, no certainty, only survival. And now, she had classes, a job, a garden, a community, and, in a strange way, a family rebuilt from fragments. Not the one she expected, but one that had formed anyway. Her phone rang. Vanessa. Savannah hesitated for a moment before answering. Hi, Mom. Hi, sweetheart. The word no longer felt foreign. It still carried weight, but not pain. They talked about simple things first. Work, school, weather. Then Vanessa's voice softened. I sent you something else. Savannah smiled slightly. What now? A photo album. A pause. I think you'll want to see it. When it arrived, Savannah brought it outside immediately. She sat on the porch, legs tucked under her, turning pages slowly. Ethan holding her as a baby. Harold teaching him how to plane wood. Small birthdays she never remembered. Hands she now recognized as part of her own. As the last light faded, Savannah closed the album and leaned back. The cabin stood behind her, solid, present. No longer a mystery of hidden walls and buried truths. Now, it was simply home. Harold had once built it, believing she might find it someday. But what he had truly built was something larger than wood and nails. He had built continuity between past and present, between loss and survival, between people who thought they were gone from each other forever. Savannah looked at the porch she had rebuilt, the garden she had planted, the life she had slowly assembled piece by piece, and she understood something quietly, without drama. She was not the end of Harold's story. She was what he had been building toward. The wind moved through the trees. The rocking chair creaked again, and Savannah Mercer sat in the home her grandfather built for her, not as someone who had been saved, but as someone who had finally learned how to build forward from love that never stopped, even when it was hidden behind walls.